Hi, my name is Father Columba Jordan. I am a Franciscan Friar of the Renewal, talking to you from Limerick in Ireland. Today I wanted to talk about sharing your faith with other people. So rule number one, don't nag. Yeah, so there's no way, well, God doesn't nag us, does he? In your relationship with him, was he kind of popping up into your bedroom and saying, you should go to church, you should pray, you should... That's just not the way he works. God doesn't impose, he always proposes. You can see this even in the Old Testament, and lots of people can think like this very negative image of God in the Old Testament, but say, for example, the people of Israel, just before they went into the Holy Land, it's in the book of Deuteronomy, it appears in other places in different forms, where God says, listen, here's this whole law I'm going to set out. Here's the kind of the guidelines for our relationship together. Do you want to do this? He didn't impose it on him. He said, do you want this? If you don't, okay, let's just walk away now. But if you do commit to this, then, you know, there's boundaries around it. So that's a great principle, that God never imposes himself on others. He always invites. He says in the book of Revelation, behold, I stand at the door and I knock. And if anyone hears me knocking and opens the door, he can come in and I'll eat dinner with him and he with me. So that's God's heart. That's Jesus' heart. He just knocks. He's not banging down the door, let me in. You let me in. Like, no, that's not him at all. He's very loving. He really is. He's very, very kind. He's incredibly respectful of our freedom and our free will. And we should be too. We should be modeling his heart. If we want to share our faith with anyone, whether that's your family members, your kids, your spouse, your work friends, whoever it is, we have to be really, really reverent of them, because that's God. Okay, so number one, do not nag, but do invite. The second principle I would say is one I really love, and this is that there is nothing more meaningless than an answer to a question that hasn't been asked. If you follow me, there's nothing more meaningless than an answer to a question that hasn't been asked. What do I mean? So imagine you're in class. When you were a kid, you're in maths class, okay? And the teacher hasn't said anything. And one of the students puts up their hand and says 25. Everyone looks at the kid like, what? He says 25. The teacher's like, wait, what are you talking about? The kid goes, 25. And the teacher starts getting angry and sends the child up to the principal. She gets in trouble. Why would they be in trouble? Because it makes no sense. It makes no sense. Now, if the teacher had said, what's 5 by 5? What's 5 multiplied by 5? Every kid puts their hand up in the air and they all say 25. And they get a reward. Why? Because that's an answer to the question that had been asked. But in the first one, there had been no question, and the kid comes out with some random thing. So it's not really an answer. It's just some random weird statement. Sometimes Christians, in talking about God to regular people, it's a bit like that. Regular people aren't necessarily always conscious of the questions in their life to which Jesus is the answer. So a big part of our role is just to be friends with people, just to accompany them in their journey of life, to get to really know them, so that we're able to not just say, oh, Jesus is the answer randomly to them on the street, for example, but rather in the midst of the journey of their life, be able to say, hey, this situation you're dealing with, I did something similar, and do you know what really helped me? Prayer. Or do you know what really helped me is my relationship with God. Have you ever prayed? Have you ever asked him, like when you're afraid or before you go to bed? Do you ever like talk to him? So that can make so much more sense, because I think we sometimes sound very strange to people in the world because they just don't know where we're coming from. It doesn't mean they're bad. It doesn't mean that they hate Jesus or anything. They just don't understand it. So try and get to know someone, get to know the questions in their heart and in their life, and then talk about Jesus. So then, just following on from that one, really, really important in sharing our faith is just friendship. Friendship with somebody. We want to first be friends, and this isn't about like, oh, I want to, win someone over. I want to, get like my reputation as somebody who's really courageous in sharing their faith. Rather, it's like, no, I want to share God with them because He's amazing. He's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Of course I want somebody else to know Him. So we should be doing it out of love and friendship, not out of some other weird motive. So it can be a good thing to check our motives. Why would I actually do this? Is it really from a place of love? Another small thing, kind of preparatory thing you can do is just normalize your faith with people. So that means mentioning it every now and again. This isn't about evangelizing. This is just mentioning the fact that, for example, you go to church, that you pray sometimes, that you go maybe on a retreat every now and again. Just not hiding those facts. Now, the first time you mention them, it's always going to be a bit strange if people don't know that you do that. I'm like, oh, really? You go to church? And just say it without any, just go, yeah, I love it. That's all. Just normalize it. The first few times it might be weird, but after a while people go, oh yeah, okay, that's their thing. And that means that this person who they really care about maybe, really dear friend, they kind of go, oh wow, that God really means something to this person, and they mean something to me. So it bridges, it gets real connection. It can help people go, maybe we can start to question maybe some of their doubt or distance from God. Other very simple thing we can do is to share our story. So you want to do that when the time is right. You just don't want to be randomly sharing it all the time. But when the time is right, and in an appropriate way that fits with what's being talked about, say, hey, this is what happened in my life. This is why I believe. Without trying to get them to buy into it or anything, just say, I believe in God. And well, I can tell you why. If you'd like to hear, I'd be delighted to share with you. Would you like to hear? And then just be ready to give it, a short, brief account, depending on the nature of the relationship. Because if somebody is a little bit curious, you don't want to give this huge, long story. We can kind of kill their curiosity with too much information. We want to maybe give the highlight version, Sometimes, sometimes it's appropriate to give a longer one, but it can be a thing to maybe consider yourself, how would I share my story? And by that I mean, why do I believe in God? What are the things that have happened in my life that have convinced me? I really want God in my life. I really believe He's real. Ask yourself those questions. Maybe write it out. Say, okay, how would I describe this in 3 minutes? How would I describe this in half an hour? Just so you have some sort of idea. And also to think, right, what kind of things might somebody find interesting? Because some things about it, they may not understand at all. And that's the other thing to consider. When you're sharing with somebody, make sure you use language that's not super churchy. So if I'm throwing out words like Eucharist, consubstantiation, transubstantiation, hypostatic union, they'll be like, what are you talking about? So really speak in their language as much as possible. Again, this is the process of normalizing our faith, normalizing Jesus. He became flesh. God, the one who we cannot relate to, because He's so holy. Holy means I can't relate to you at all. You are so vastly different from me. So the Holy One, the separate one, became flesh. He took on our humanity so that we actually can relate to Him. We can connect with Him. Jesus is the bridge between the Father and us. And so too, we have been sent by Jesus to be bridges between Jesus and other people. So it helps if we really work on that process to be a bridge, to meet them where they are and bring them higher. Something I've done a few times is to propose a relational exploration, could we say, of God. A relational exploration. What do I mean? So I was on a flight one time and I was talking to someone, and because I'm dressed like this all the time and I have the big beard, it usually comes up, so what are you? So this is another great way to evangelize. Become a Franciscan. You can contact me. So it came up about God and about this person's faith, and they didn't really believe, and for various reasons, and had issues with the church. So what I proposed to them was, I said, well, no, do you ever talk to God? Have you ever tried that? And they were like, no, because it kind of didn't make sense to them. It's like, well, God is this thing, and I don't know if I believe in this thing, so why would I talk to a thing I don't know if is there? Well, that's a good point. But I said, the proposal is that God is a person. So if you want to explore this proposal, you need to approach it as you would approach, well, any person. How do we approach people? We talk to them. So to consider, I said that to her, like, consider, like, just ask him. Like, no one needs to know. You could just, in the silence of your heart one night, you can just say, God, if you're real, let me know. That's actually what I did when I was 17. I said, Jesus, if you're real, I really need to know. And it was a really sincere prayer. And encouraged them to do that. I was like, just talk to him as if he is real. Just pretend, well, if you are real, I really want to know. Because it's definitely worth knowing if God is real or not. And it was a real, it was wonderful in that conversation. You could kind of see, she went, something clicked in her mind. She's like, that sounds, what did it sound like? It sounded doable. She could wrap her mind around that idea. It suddenly wasn't so alien to her, this thought of a relationship with God. It was like, oh, okay, is that all? Yeah, okay, I could do that. And that's actually a great thing, just to propose to friends or people who don't believe. Just say, well, have you ever asked him about him? Have you ever approached God in this way, this relational way? Because often we approach God as if he's a theory, or we try to say, oh, if you don't obey, my strict laws of scientific examination, then you mustn't exist. And it's just not accurate. Another great way is just in general invitation. And this is really my last point on this one. Just invitation. So this can be very broad, very, very broad. Again, it fits into this whole thing of proposing to someone. It's like, well, if you'd like to explore it, I'm going to church. Now, I would usually say if someone's a total newbie to Christianity or anything like that, inviting them to Mass is maybe not the best place to start, because there's so much in there, and it's not really, the Mass isn't really designed as in a place of evangelization. But what can be amazing is adoration. Adoration of the Blessed Sacrament is a great place. You can invite someone to come along and experience this and just see. And then they can just sit there very quietly. It's just silent prayer. Say, just come, we just sit for 15 minutes in quiet. And that's all. And you can be praying for them while they're there. And it's amazing. People who have no connection with God, no connection with Catholicism, anything, they walk into a Catholic church or they come into one of those times of adoration and they're like, whoa. They can feel something because Jesus is really there, right? So let Jesus do his work. That's what I like to think of the Blessed Mother doing that, It's like, come and meet my son, back in the day in Galilee. Come, talk to him. Jesus, talk to this guy. That's what the apostles did. We see Andrew doing that with his brother. Peter, he takes Peter to Jesus, like the second day, the day after he met Jesus. And he just brought him to him. And that's what we can do. Just bring him along. Nice and easy. Invitation. We can invite them to other things. Is there a church gathering or a prayer group? Is there a barbecue going on? Is there a gathering of friends? It doesn't have to be like a prayer event. It could just be a gathering of Christians as Christians. But like this person who's outside, like they could know, oh wow, y'all are really normal. That's cool. Okay, I thought you'd all be kind of weird. That can be really powerful for people to prepare and open their heart to realize maybe God isn't so strange after all. Like, challenge them to reconsider. In all of this, it can be a great thing to really commit to accompanying them. I talked about friendship and the importance of that, the importance of friendship in this process. And that gets into what Pope Francis talked about, like this accompaniment of people. What does it mean to come alongside someone in the journey without any judgments, without having to, I really need you to believe, but just to be really gentle, really to listen to them, ask them questions about their journey, ask them questions about what they think, ask them questions about, what's your spirituality? Have you prayed? So sometimes this isn't going to happen overnight. We might like to think, just this one moment of conversion. But we have to be really, really patient with people. Really patient. And be in it for the long haul. That's the sign of love. At the same time, what I would say is, when you're evangelizing, if someone is completely closed, they're not open to prayer, they're not open to conversation, they're just like, nope, don't believe in God, don't pray, never have, not open. That's okay. But I wouldn't, especially if I was in a context, let's say I'm talking to them on an airplane, or on the street, so it's just a once-off connection, it's not going to go on and on. I'm not going to spend a whole pile of time trying to convince them that God is real if they aren't even open to any sort of spirituality. I'm just going to stop right there. There's if we think of the world like an orchard, there's lots of people, they're ripe fruit, they're ready. There's like an apple on the tree. And it's like, if you just touch that apple, pop. It'll pop off into your hand. It's ready to be harvested. And then there's lots of apples on the tree that aren't ready. And it's not going to help them or anybody else if we try harvesting them and they're not ready. We're like pulling them off and they're bitter. We have to throw them out anyway. So sometimes people aren't ready. And we need to respect that. So folks who you meet may not be ready to receive the gospel, and that's life and that's okay. So we just let it go and just say, okay, God bless you. Or you change the subject, talk about something else. Now, if it's someone who's your friend, okay, that might be different. You kind of give them a bit more space and you've got much more of the long program. So there's kind of those two things operating in once. When it comes to just a short contact sort of a thing, if they're not open, I'll just leave it fairly quickly. But when it's a friendship, you play the long game and be committed to accompanying them, which means intentionally asking them about this stuff, intentionally continuing to invite them to things, continuing to normalize faith and conversation about spirituality and God, not to pull back, not to hide from that, right? Another really powerful thing that I have experienced in leading people to God is I guess it'd be two things. You could bring them to an event where there's some form of prayer going on, like let's say a healing service, or there's some sort of, sometimes you can have things like charismatic events where there's prayer ministry, where people can get prayed with. This, maybe more than anything else, I've seen people have an almost instantaneous shift from zero belief in God to, whoa, shocked belief that God is actually real. This is how Jesus did it, right? He preached the gospel, but then he worked signs and wonders. And when he commissioned the apostles and all of us, the whole church, when he did it, he always did it in the context of signs and wonders. He said, these are the signs that will accompany believers. They will heal the sick, they will raise the dead, they will cast out demons, they will drink poison. I haven't seen the drinking poison thing happening too much, to be honest. But miracles I have seen. Healings, I've seen that happen. And I've seen people come to faith because of them. And that's what's the really amazing thing. That's the whole point. So if there is something like that, if you have something that maybe in your church, or you hear of an event coming up, it can be a great thing. Like bring your friend around. So there's this guy coming in and he's got a gift of healing. Do you want to, I'm really curious. Do you want to come and see? I've also had situations where I'm talking to someone about God and then I offer myself to pray with them. We've been talking about it, maybe I've proposed a relational model, said, you could just ask God if he's real. And then I might say, would you be open to me praying with you right now? I'll do it so nobody else knows. No one will know, it would just be real subtle. But that God is real and he really wants you to experience him. And if you're open to that, then let's go for it. So many, many times I've done that with young people. I used to work in a school. And it was normal in the school that I would pray with people, or they'd come to me and say, Father, could you pray with me? A lot of kids who'd gotten some injuries or something, and not everyone was healed, but piles of them were healed. Piles of them were. This is a real thing. And I'm not just saying this about me, it's not just like priests and bishops and whoever else. This is a thing that Jesus has commissioned all of us to do. And you see this in the Acts of the Apostles. This is a really cool thing, right? So Peter and John were just in front of the Sanhedrin. They'd gotten in a lot of trouble because of preaching. They healed a guy and then there's this commotion in the temple. They get dragged in front of the Sanhedrin who had just sentenced Jesus to death. And they're commanded not to preach in Jesus' name. they go back to the church, and the church has this big prayer gathering. And in it, rather than being afraid, they're not saying, oh, please protect us from the bad Sanhedrin. They don't say that at all. They say, Lord, give us boldness that we can preach your word with all courage and boldness. And then they say, and that you would stretch out your hand, and that you would work signs and wonders, and you would heal people. So this was how they understood evangelization. It's not just preaching some word. It's not just me sharing a story, but in a huge part, it was also through miracles. And that's something I truly believe. And the church teaches this is still alive and active. They're called the charisms. And yeah, they're definitely very, very powerful. And that's not, so, we don't want to miss that out if you get this opportunity. And I've prayed with people, even just very, very simple prayers, or led them in a little prayer. And one way that it can be very helpful, when somebody is ready, I'll often ask them, say, would you be open to saying a little prayer? Would you be open to asking Jesus into your heart in a very simple way? And I'm always amazed. Some people will say, no, maybe not. But other people who'll be really up say, yeah, that'd be great. And maybe they've been, going to church their whole life, but they've never actually asked Jesus into their life and into their heart to be the God, to be really Lord over them. And I'll just very, very simply lead them in a little prayer, and I'll say it and have them repeat it. Something like, I might get them to close their eyes if they're comfortable. Say, dear Jesus, please come into my heart. Please come into my heart. I open my heart now. And they repeat, I open my heart now. I'd love to get to know you. I'd love to get to know you. Please fill me with your Holy Spirit. And they repeat. That's basically it. Very, very simple. And that's really it. I'll just very simply lead them in a prayer. Now, often that's kind of towards the end of, say, a session of talking about God with somebody. But I found it like people actually are, when they're ready, they're ready. And sometimes we just need to be very simple, but very, courageous, just to give it a go with our friends, family, workmates, whoever it might be. Anyway, there you go. I hope that's helpful. God bless you.